Today we are going to do the unexpected. We are going to be examining a real-life unicorn, the Amazon Fire Phone. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I purchased this device with my own money. Granted, it was only $199 for the 32 gig unlocked GSM version, no contract or anything, which makes it a little easier to justify, but still. If you were to purchase one of these, in the box you'd find the phone itself, an Amazon branded 1 amp power brick, a strange pair of magnetic earbuds, some basic information and instruction guides, and a SIM removal tool, and finally a micro USB cable. The Fire Phone itself, if you're not familiar with it, has a 4.7-inch 720p display, a 2.2 GHz quad-core Snapdragon 800 processor, 2 gigs of RAM, 32 or 64 gigs of built-in storage. This one again has 32 gigs of storage, a 13 megapixel rear-facing camera with built-in optical image stabilization, a 2.1 megapixel front-facing camera with 4 additional front-facing cameras, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and a 2400 milliamp hour battery. Oh, and it's got Gorilla Glass 3 on the front, but also on the rear, with this rubberized plastic all around the sides, making it a little easier to grip. Now, as far as reviewing this device, I found it extremely difficult for me. First off, it uses a nano SIM, and every device that I've used up until now was micro SIM. So I had to buy a micro SIM card cutter, and it didn't work. It worked a little bit, but after a few hours, it just said SIM not recognized. So $10 and a new nano SIM later, I was back in business, and now I've got a SIM that'll work with whatever phone I want to throw it in because it came with a bunch of adapters. Also, I should mention, the Fire Phone runs Amazon's Fire OS version 3.6.8 based on Android Jelly Bean. Yeah, I felt that cringe from you all right there, right along with me. Amazon has said that Fire OS 4 should be coming to this device soon, and that's based on KitKat, but I'm not really holding my breath at this point. But surprisingly enough, Jelly Bean with Amazon's UI on top of it runs extremely smooth. There were a few longer load times on certain apps, but the Snapdragon 800 with 2 gigs of RAM, it's still extremely formidable as far as smartphone specs go. I actually have also started to really like the Amazon carousel that they've got for recent apps. It's just a really neat take on launcher design, so that the apps that you use show up on the home screen, and the ones that you want you can actually pin to the front of the list. The downside here for someone like me is that this doesn't come with any Google services on it out of the box, and Amazon's App Store is missing quite a few of the apps that I use on a regular basis. Their built-in email app, their contacts and calendar, they all work really well with Google and Google Apps, and I really enjoyed their combined inbox feature. I think Google is actually going to be adding that to an updated version of Gmail that should be coming out like now. But if you're a heavy user of Google Hangouts, Google Plus, and YouTube, like I am, it's not going to be a great experience out of the box. Luckily, it was absolutely trivial to download a copy of the Google services, including the Play Store, so between Amazon's App Store and the Play Store, I was mostly good to go. I did have to sideload Google Plus to it because the Play Store said my device was incompatible, but that wasn't a big deal either. Now, there are some really unique features that come with the Fire Phone as well. The UI is gesture-based, so there's one large home button on the front of the device and no other buttons on the front of the device. So you don't have a back button or a menu button. If you want the back action, you actually have to swipe up from the bottom of the screen, which works really well in both portrait and landscape mode. And if you want a menu, I believe you actually get it by swiping in from the right-hand side of the screen. That one's a bit inconsistent. That's still up to app design at this point, but in the apps that it worked with, the Amazon apps primarily, it did work very well. As I mentioned earlier, there are 4 front-facing cameras in addition to the main front-facing camera that are always on, and there are infrared lights built into the front of the device to help these 4 extra cameras continue to work even when you're sitting in the dark. Those 4 additional cameras are used to add a dynamic display to the device, making it look like the icons and things on the screen move when you turn the phone to one side or the other. Now, as I expected, at first this was a really neat feature, and when I hand the phone to somebody, that first thing they see is, wait, what's going on? But after a little bit of time, I found myself not caring about it quite so much, and so I turned off most of the dynamic features. Like, they have a really ridiculously silly peek feature where you can see extra information about things when you tilt it sideways, and like the status bar is not there until you tilt it sideways. I don't get that. They've also got an auto scroll feature, so when you're reading a book or an article or something, you can tilt the phone back or forward to scroll up or down. I'm not going to be using that, especially if you lay it on the table and it does it. Now, additionally, if you have that dynamic display turned on, so things move whenever you're looking at it, your screen is not going to automatically turn off. So when I'm listening to music in the car and I've got it up in my little dash mount, I have to actually hit the power button to get it to go to standby, because otherwise it thinks I'm looking at it the whole time and the screen stays on. Moving right along though, the camera has built-in option called Firefly, which attempts to scan objects and tries to figure out what they are. And then it does a search on Amazon or through other third-party providers for things like music and videos and a box of cereal and some calorie information about things and a CD that you found or a TV show you might be watching. It really all depends on what you want to use it for. Definitely a really neat feature, and they actually even devoted a part of this little built-in camera button to it. So if you hold the button all the way down and hold it down, it goes straight into Firefly mode. So it loads up the camera for you, and it's got these little tinglies on the camera to let you know that it's doing that. I hate to say it, but I kind of wish that you could disable that, because I love having a camera shutter button, but I would rather be able to push it all the way to take a picture. As it is, you tap it to take a picture, and then you push it all the way down, it goes into Firefly. Not a big fan of that. But I guess it does make sense, because that's Amazon's way of keeping you in their ecosystem, keeping you coming back to Amazon to buy things. Oh, I can just scan this and it'll take me back to Amazon to buy what I want to buy. Anyway, speaking of the camera, I was not absolutely blown away by it. It does a decent job, I would say. The pictures it takes are acceptable, good enough for social media, especially when you're outdoors, when you're in good lighting, things like that. The videos, again, in good lighting, they're not horrible, but I've definitely seen better, and the optical image stabilization doesn't appear to do anything in video mode. Although, surprisingly enough, this does do pretty well in low light, a lot better than some other cameras that I've seen. It's a bit grainy, but like I said, I've seen cameras that do a lot worse. Battery life on this is sort of middle of the road as well. As I've said, it's 2400 milliamp hours, so it's not exactly huge, but it is an acceptable size. By the end of the day, I usually have just under 60% battery life left with my average everyday use, but under heavy usage, I've seen it go as low as 35% or so. Again, that's just my sort of average use and heavy usage, so your experience may be a little different than mine, but like I said, battery life hasn't been a problem for me so far with this. Now, unfortunately for me, the biggest downside of this entire device is the lack of Bluetooth 4 and Bluetooth Low Energy. That basically means that wearables aren't going to work with it, ever. So mostly for the last few weeks that I've been using this, I've been doing without my Android Wear device, or I've been pairing it to another device, so I'm getting notifications from two devices. They don't sync up. It's weird. Just gonna say I'm not a fan of that. Bluetooth 4 was a necessity and it doesn't have it. Also, there are some really weird audio issues when you're playing audio over Bluetooth. It will occasionally cut out for a couple of beats. You know, you'll just be listening to something, going right along, and then suddenly it cuts out for just a second. Even when you're playing local content. I thought it might just be buffering, but it does it on local content as well. So it's not a problem with that. It has to do with the Bluetooth. Because when you're playing over the speaker, when you're not using Bluetooth, it doesn't do that. Anyway, just to wrap things up, my thoughts about the device. If you don't rely on Bluetooth 4 and wearables, if you're willing to spend a couple of minutes installing the Google Play Store and the Google Play services, and especially if you're planning to pay $100 for another year of Amazon Prime anyway, because I forgot to mention, this does come with a free year of Amazon Prime. An extra $100 to get a pretty nice phone is not a bad deal as far as I'm concerned. It does look like it has jumped back up to $449 as of the filming of this video, but I have seen it at that $199 price more than a few times over the last few months, so do keep an eye on it if it does sound interesting to you. I mean, this is a rock solidly built device, and it has still very good specs and very good performance for that price. But if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, I will be using this sort of off and on over the next foreseeable future, I guess. I'll be on the lookout for Fire OS 4 and maybe give you a little video about that once it becomes available. But that's going to be all from me for today. Remember to hit that like button if you like this video, subscribe to receive all of my future videos whenever they become available, and I will see you again next time. Bye, guys.